Thank you. Good afternoon. Welcome to the Planning Committee for 29th of July 2025. Just start with a brief introduction of ourselves. I'm Councillor Arshad Afsar, the Planning Committee Chair. If I can just ask everybody from my right to press the mic and just introduce yourselves, please.
Good afternoon, Naomi Perry, Planning Manager.
Alan Harvey, Principal Planning Officer.
Emily Summers, Senior Planning Officer.
Mark Evans, Staffordshire County Council Highways.
Monica Holton, East Staffordshire Borough Council for Eton and Burton.
Councillor Sheila McKiernan for Shobnall Ward.
Councillor McHuckabee for Branston.
Good afternoon, Councillor Michael Slater, Horninglow and outwards.
Good
afternoon, Councillor Bev George.
Colin Whittaker, Councillor of the Abbey Ward, no, the Blythe Ward.
Councillor Jackie Jones. Councillor Chris Smedley.
Councillor Liz Bullock.
Emily Thomas, Democratic Services Officer.
Akil Adnan, Planning Lawyer.
Penelope James, Principal Solicitor.
Thank you, members. We'll just start with some housekeeping rules. So if I can remind everybody present that the meeting is being broadcast live via YouTube and the recording will be archived for future viewings. Could I ask all councillors and officers to ensure that when you speak, press your microphone so it's on, and when you finish, please turn it off so the camera can focus on the individual speaking. If I could ask all members and members of the public to switch off your mobile phones. We're not expecting a fire alarm today, so if you do hear the fire alarm go, it will be a live call, so muster back out the way you came in on the car park. Moving on to agenda item number 1. Do we have any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. No apologies.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2. Do we have any declarations of interest any member wishes to declare? Thank you. No declarations of interest. Can I ask, agenda item number 3, can I ask members to accept the minutes from the last meeting held on 24th of July 2025? Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Whittaker.
Yeah, I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you. All those in favour? Any against? Any abstentions? Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 4. We've got a vacant post at the moment for the Vice Chair. Could I seek anybody wanting to nominate themselves for the position of Vice Chair, please? Councillor Jones.
Not myself, but I'll nominate Councillor Whittaker.
Councillor Whittaker. Councillor McKiernan.
Can I nominate Councillor Huckabee?
Thank you. So we have 2 interested members, Councillor Whittaker and Councillor Huckabee. So we'll have to take a vote on each member. Firstly, can I have a seconder for Councillor Whittaker? Councillor George. Seconder for Councillor Huckabee? Councillor Holton. Thank you. So moving to a vote for Councillor Whittaker. All those in favour of Councillor Whittaker? Thank you. That's 5 members. All those in favour of Councillor Huckabee? That's 5 members. So we have a tie there. So can't anyone against? Any abstentions? 1 abstention. So moving to, we have a tie, so moving forward, voting for Councillor Huckabee, my casting vote will go with Councillor Huckabee. So congratulations, Councillor Huckabee. You're elected as the Vice Chair. Agenda item number 5. Do we have any urgent business to be brought to the committee's attention? No urgent business. Moving straight on to our agenda item number 6. Applications for planning permission to be considered today. So we have 1 application for the variation of conditions 3, 5, 6 and 41 of the approved hybrid planning application reference number P2021/00868, site address land bound by Tutbury Road, Rollston Road and Haredge Lane, Burton-on-Trent. I'll pass over to the planning officer to present the case.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we've been on site this morning and had a look at the site. I think it's important maybe for at the outset just to set out again that the application is a Section 73 application. So we're dealing with changes to an already approved scheme in terms of the larger overall development. So that original permission has already set the quantum of development. What we've got in front of us today are changes in terms of the internal layouts, the movement strategy, and in terms of green open space and blue space, and changing within the application site itself. I will try and present it as clear as possible. There's lots of overlaps onto other areas, as members will appreciate. And also, obviously conscious as well that members of the public are here. They know that there's, as well as being there's an original permission, which the Chair's already mentioned from 2021 reference. We've got the application in front of us today, which is a Section 73 application, which changes or seeks to change the elements of that. And there's also another application live at the present moment in time, which members of the public have been consulted on as well, and the parish councils, etc., which is for a reserved matters submission for part of the site. Now, that isn't brought in front of members today for the very purpose that this application has to be determined in the first place before the reserved matters can go towards committee. It doesn't mean, to members of the public, that the comments that people have made in terms of reserved matters are forgotten about. They would have to come forward if the reserved matters application comes forward to committee in due course. But at the end of the day, this application has to be determined first, and it also would have to be determined in a positive manner for that reserved matters application to come forward. So I just hope that clears up for everybody and for the people watching as well to understand what we're looking at today is not that their comments have been ignored when they're talking about the scale of development in terms of heights and locations, because that is all shown on the reserved matters application, but that's not in front of members or ourselves today. So when I make comment about what's for consideration, it will be a professional advice comment saying a clear matters of fact and setting out what's in front of us and what forms part of the reserved matters application if that arises. Okay. So, as we say, application is now P 2024-01125. It's subject to a committee report. It runs to about 40 to 50 pages. As members will know, it's a long read. I'm summarising this as my presentation, so I will seek to cover all areas as best as possible. There's an update sheet as well, so members, I'll refer to that, and so members be aware of that. And there's also a slight change to the officer recommendation as a consequence. And there's also been other correspondence received further to that from interested parties, and I will make reference to that as well. So as Chair says, there's section 73 application is to vary the specific conditions, and we'll go through that as we go along. The original approval provides for 500 dwellings for specialist residential accommodation, so a care home, a local centre, and again we'll go through the uses that's permitted in that, and associated works. And then in terms of the full application, that only relates to the access points in the spine road between Tutbury Road and Ralston Road. So we'll go through a set of slides and just provide a little bit of context, and then we'll go into the differences between the two schemes. So the location of the development, as we all stood on Harehedge Lane, is the land that runs to the north of Harehedge Lane, and it's bounded by Ralston Road, as you can see there, and on Tutbury Road, and then it sits actually within the two parishes. It's split between Outwards to the south and Ralston Parish to the north. In terms of all the different elements in the surround, you've got St Modwyn School, which is accessed off Tutbury Road there. You've got the Beacon Hotel at the junction on the roundabout. You've got Wilson Way, which is a small, relatively modern cul-de-sac of development, and you've got the DeFerrers and Outward schools across the road from the application site. You've also got these residential properties that lie within the boundaries of the land that's surrounded by the application site. So there's one on Tutbury Road, there are two on Harehedge Lane, and there's also one on Ralston Road. They don't form part of the application site, but they are bounded on all sides other than their road frontage. Also, references also been made in numerous correspondence to Athelston Way, and that's on the opposite side of Ralston Road from the application site. And Bitham Lane and the junction with Harehedge Lane and Ralston Road are also referred to because there's junction improvements proposed by the original approval, and that would remain the case in terms of the proposed scheme now. So just going through the photographs of the locality, we were stood this morning mainly on Harehedge Lane for the introduction to the actual meeting. So you've got a view here, one looking across the main part of the application site. Relatively, the land rises slightly up from Harehedge Lane onwards, and then again you've got another view of the application site. These are views taken from Harehedge Lane but towards Ralston Road. So again, you've got very much an open field at the minute, and with trees and hedges, and then on Ralston Road you've got the houses on the opposite side. Again, from Harehedge Lane, you've got a view towards what would be the location of the proposed, that's at 5, that would be the location of the proposed care home. And then you've got a slide here showing Wilson Way, and the development and the access would be adjacent to that. Moving on, we're going up Tutbury Road now. So again, we were stood this morning looking across the fields near St Modwyn School. And again, this is looking back at the top of the site, back across the site, back towards Ralston Road, and then that's along Tutbury Road itself. A couple more recent photographs, as members again saw today. Works for the Spine Road have already commenced, and this is the access off Ralston Road. And then on the other side, the hedge has been removed to provide the access to the Spine Road off Tutbury Road. So, back to where we started in 2023 permission. There was an application that was a hybrid, so it was a combination of full and outline. The full proposals involved just the Spine Road, as it links between Tutbury Road and Ralston Road. And then as an outline scheme, other than the access off Harehedge Lane, Everything else was in outline. So this is what I'm talking about, that in the future the reserved matters will come to committee once the outline, or the revised outline in this case, is put in place or not. So the scheme involved up to 500 affordable and market houses, a local centre with up to a total footprint of 650 square metres, and that can comprise of either retail uses, sale of food and drink but not hot food, financial and professional services, indoor and sport and recreation, medical or health facilities, or office to carry out operational administrative functions. Alongside that, there was approximately 5.46 hectares of multifunctional green and blue infrastructure, and that also provided for tree planting, native woodland to the northern edge, a leap, which is the play area, and incidental play areas and the suds. Also along with that, specialist accommodation, which was shown on land adjacent to Tutbury Road, and then also the new junction of Harehedge Lane, which would serve the local centre, and the community car park, which is to be delivered off this access off Harehedge Lane upon the occupation of the 50th dwelling on the development. There's also was only to be access one way northwards beyond the local centre and community car park towards the Link Spine Road. So what we'll do is we'll just quickly go through the approved plans and then the changes that reflect. So this was the illustrative master plan from 2023. You've got Tutbury Road and Ralston Road linked by the Spine Road. You've got the specialist accommodation located on Tutbury Road. You've got the suds in the bottom corner, and then you've got off there the Harehedge Lane access was the local centre, the community car park, the one-way access to the north of the community car park and local centre, and then that was just an illustrative example of how residential development could be provided on elsewhere in the site. So that map's just to show some context, it's for illustrative purposes only. What did come with the 2023 approval was the land use plan. So you've got predominantly residential, which is this beige orangey colour. You've got the local centre off Harehedge Lane, and then you've got the specialist accommodation for the elderly at Tutbury Road. In terms of the movement plan, there was a footway, cycleway proposed to the eastern boundary. Again, just showing the local centre, its location, and then beyond the local centre, there was a one-way vehicular route. Also in place and still retained, just to point out to members, was there was going to be a footway, cycleway link through to Wilson Way, and there was also a footpath link through to the school from one of the residential roads. Also proposes an upgrade to the Harehedge Lane, Ralston Road, Bitham Lane junction. So this will kick in before the occupation of the 100th dwelling, or the equivalent level of development on the application site. This is the scheme as proposed in the 2023 application. Now, running alongside our planning work, there's a requirement for the applicants to get the layout and the details of this junction signed off by the County Highway Authority, and that's currently underway. So there's no finalised junction at this point in time in terms of the design layout, but that has to be in place by the 100th dwelling, as required by condition 34. Right, so we're coming to the changes now. So I've highlighted those in blue. Trying not to, obviously conscious that I'm spending quite a long time going through this, but in short, the full application will be realignments of the Spine Road. Within the green and blue infrastructure, there's realignments. The specialist accommodation is going to be relocated, and I'll show a plan of that. And then the key changes to the Harehedge Lane is that you're going to have alterations in terms of the level of development that is going to be served off that, and we'll come to the details. and then there's the omission now of the footway cycle path to the eastern boundary. In visual form, this is the alignments to the spine road running through. In terms of the proposed land use plan, so highlighting there that the specialist accommodation is moving to be adjacent to Wilson Way in the southern area of the site, and the area that was formerly occupied by Tutbury Road will be in dwellings. In terms of the other proposals, so there's the omission of the footway cycleway along the eastern boundary. And then there's what I'll come to in terms of the complicated, shall we say, situation, more in terms of the movements. So, to go back to the original approved plan from 2013, Hareage Lane was always proposed to be a in and out access, but only to serve the local centre in this area here. Beyond that, it was going to be one-way traffic only. So that would go all the way to the Spine Road. On the current application, what's being proposed is that you're still going to have in and out onto Hareage Lane. But what will happen is that Hareage Lane Junction will serve the local centre, which is in here. It will serve the relocated specialist accommodation, and it would serve a quantum of residential development in that below number 5. And the mouse has decided it's not going to play ball in that area there. And then at point 5, what you'll have is that you'll have access only for cyclists and pedestrians. So if you're going from the southern area of the site to the northern area site, you would have to go back out the Hareage Lane Junction and go round and join the Spine Road. So also to the Spine Road, you've got a truncated secondary access to those areas in the eastern area of the site. So that's residential. That's residential. They'll only be served in vehicular-wise to the Spine Road, and all the area of the residential going northwards from 5 will also only be served in and out of the Spine Road. Green and blue infrastructure plan. So these are the changes here. So what you've got is the approved scheme. So you've got, as part of the application process, and some of the questions were about why it's changed, is that there has been an involvement of the design review, the Midland Design Review Panel, and in terms of the overall development of the site, what they wished to see was green corridors rather than just wholly isolated areas. So what you got in terms of the difference between the proposals is that there's a change in the alignment in the central area, and what you've got is some of the land, some of the green space being reallocated as a green spine that runs east to west through the application site. So the quantum is the same as before, but what you've got is an alteration in terms of the actual layout within the site itself. So, take a break, just make sure I've covered all the ground. So we're going to go quickly through the committee report, and I'll refer to the update sheet where relevant at this point. So in terms of consultation responses, there's been no objections from any statutory consultees. In some cases, this has involved going back with additional information, and obviously in particular the highways, which has involved the County Highway Authority requesting additional supporting information in terms of highway modelling work. Mark Evans, colleague from the County Highways, is here. And he can maybe field questions on that particular aspect as we go through it. But essentially the County Highways are happy and content with the proposal. Now, as set out in the report, the proposal in terms of those changes to the access will increase to some degree the level of traffic within onto Hareheads Lane. So going back to the actual technical note itself, and this is quoted in the committee report, this talks about the modelling exercise saying that the revised access strategy with the 73 application is forecast to result in an additional 20 and 25 two-way trips through the Hareheads Lane, Rollston Road, Bitham Lane junction during the respective AM and PM peak periods. So the modelling exercise sets out that the AM, PM peak periods are, in terms of AM, is between 8 and 9, and the peak PM period is between 5 and 6. Now, I know a number of people have challenged that data, and I'll come to that in a minute. So in terms of the consultations, Outwards and Streatham Parish provided no representations in terms of the consultation. In terms of the Parish Council at Rollston, they requested that there'll be a reduction from 40 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour on road speed along Rollston Road, and required that the construction management plan prevents vehicles coming through Rollston. The Rollston Civic Trust contended that the link road was a new thing, but that as we've shown in terms of the application, it was on the 2023 approval. And they also considered reducing, the speed limit should be reduced on Rollston Road. In terms of ESBC ward members, there's been no comments received. In terms of local residents, there's a number of objections and concerns raised. Now, they're all set out obviously in the committee report itself. They're also set out in the update sheet, and there are members of the public who will be speaking today. In the round, their objections relate to the principle of, for example, of the shop being required on the site. In terms of residential amenity, noise and disturbance, loss of privacy, pollution, overlooking, overbearing, overshadowing, and also the request for green buffers to existing dwellings. Also in terms of highways, increased rat run with the straight and spine road, increasing car use, increasing traffic accidents, congestions, concerns about school children's safety, concerns about the accuracy and traffic modelling and survey work. That's set out in detail both in the committee report and on the update sheet, where actually one individual has actually done their own traffic survey work, and that's been made available to the County Highway Authority. In terms of flooding and drainage, there's a challenge whether the proposed drainage scheme will be sufficient to alleviate surface water flooding. There's a concern about overdevelopment in terms of being out of character, a concern that there's insufficient landscaping, a failure to mitigate the loss of green spaces, biodiversity and trees. In terms of engagement, there's a concern about a lack of meaningful consultation, community involvement from the developer, suggestions that have not been responded to, and a contention over a lack of detail. From the planning point of view, we're content that all the full consultation process has been undertaken. On other issues, concerns about where telegraph poles will be resited or removed, which is a matter for statutory bodies. Concern about the mitigation on local infrastructure, doctor surgery, schools, etc., and the impacts on Wilson Way of the proposed footpath link. In terms of policies, these actually are largely as they were back in 2023. The local plan, the neighbourhood plan, for both Rollston and outwards, and supplementary planning documents that are all referenced in front of members and the public. So, in terms of the planning considerations, and again, needfully summarised for the presentation of this report, just getting the update sheet again. So, in terms of the principle, this has been established by the grant of planning permission. The site was always allocated in the local plan as a sustainable urban extension. and the site's also within the settlement boundary for Burton. In terms of design and impact on the character of the area, as set out in the report, this scheme as an outline scheme is talking about allocation of land uses and not specific height, size and location of buildings. In terms of this scheme, as per the 2023 approval, it's considered that schemes provide sufficient detail that any development could be progressed in principle at reserved matters, and to provide suitable siting, density, scale and design at that stage. In terms of historic environment, there's no detrimental impact on built heritage assets and no archaeological implications. The site does contain a number of historic hedgerows, and as per the 2023 approval, an informative has been included to seek that reserved matters retain as many of these as possible. In terms of flood risk and drainage, there's no technical objections in principle on flood risk or drainage grounds. A number of conditions are put in place which will have to be complied with as the detailed scheme come forward, and they have to be approved in conjunction with the lead local flood authority. In terms of residential amenity, it's considered that the outline submissions sufficiently demonstrate that a scheme could be progressed without necessarily giving rise to negative impacts on existing residential amenities. The reserved matters stage would allow for the impact of detailed schemes to be assessed. At the construction stage, it's also considered that adverse impacts in terms of noise and dust can be controlled by the implementation of strict conditions. And again, they are on the recommended decision to include dust management plan, noise mitigation and working hours. In terms of highway safety, and Mark obviously here to field any questions you may have on this matter, the County Highway Authority have reviewed the submissions. They asked for additional information and concluded that they've got no objections to the scheme as revised, as it will not materially impact on the surrounding network. Mark will go through this, but the test in terms of highways is impact on capacities and severity. In terms of biodiversity, the county ecologist is still content that the necessary mitigation measures can be put in place. A number of conditions were on the 2023 approval, and they will similarly be attached to provide for further surveys, management plans, enhancement measures and lighting mitigation plans. In terms of open space and sports, illustrative plan shows that open areas of open space can be provided on the site, including LEAP, and again they will come forward in detail at reserved matters. There's a financial contribution towards off-site sports provision, which brings me nicely to the sections 106 clauses. Again, these are set out in the committee report, so if just try and go over these quickly. So these were all secured as part of the original permission 2023, and they will similarly be secured on any recommendation with this current application, and they put in place secondary and post 16-year-old provision of education, contributions towards the primary care centre under the healthcare, refuse container requirement for ESBC, affordable housing provision, which will come forward as part of the reserved matters applications, a travel plan with a monitoring fee, provision, if necessary, for a traffic regulation order. That's under the that would be what's required on site. Sports provision, there's an off-site contribution of £4,777-ish towards pitch provision, ancillary provision, an off-site contribution of £400,000 towards indoor sports. And then the section 106 would always provide for an establishment of a management and maintenance company. Didn't quite get there, did I? Right, just to come to the conclusion, as far as officers are concerned, the proposal, taking on board all the consultation responses, complies with the local plan, national planning policy framework, the neighbourhood plans and supplementary planning documents. We've engaged during the process as part of, in terms of looking for additional information from the applicants. So the recommendation comes to planning committee with an approval for the variations to the conditions as set out in the committee report, subject to a couple of changes which are referred to in the update sheet, and that's on condition 3, where it's proposed to omit the reference to the technical note, and also in terms of condition 41, where there's been a slight change to the drawing to remove an anomaly on the plans. The background to that is set out in the update sheet, but essentially it is because the general arrangement plan is in line with the request of the Highway Authority, and in terms of the technical notes, the purpose of the note was merely to inform the Highway Authority of the consideration of the application, and all relevant highway details going forward are already covered in conditions, for example conditions 34 and 42, and under the Highway Acts, for example, see informative 14. So that's the officer recommendation and the close to my presentation.
Thank you for the presentation. We've got a number of speakers on this item. Just need to make one comment before we call the speakers up. So we've got one speaker who's asked not to be filmed. So obviously this means that the cameras will not focus on the public speakers. That's all the public speakers during this part of the meeting. However, the recordings will still capture the audio from the public speakers. Each public speaker will get 3 minutes from the time you press your mic. And there is a clock at the back here that will count you down. So if I could ask for the first speaker, Terry Parsons, to come forward, please.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. I'm here to speak on the proposed junction changes and biodiversity protection associated with these alterations. I'm here to oppose the current alterations and advocate for development that puts safety, environmental responsibility and community cohesion at its core. The proposed junction changes raise serious safety and operational concerns. Speed is already an issue at this location, and without calming measures, increased traffic complexity and proximity to schools, this will increase risk significantly. The south-facing filter lane blocks visibility of the proposed pedestrian crossing for vehicles turning right from Bitham Lane. Its placement in combination with a junction design forces users to process multiple hazards from multiple directions at the same time, increasing accident risk. Filter lane traffic will also disrupt the informal driver courtesy that currently keeps the junction flowing, worsening delays. It's also noted that the position and geometry of the traffic island on Hare Hedge Lane restricts access to Bitham Lane, creating unnecessary conflict. Key crossing points on Hare Hedge Lane and Bitham Lane lack formal pedestrian crossings, increasing risk, especially for children and the elderly. The proposed park exit feeds directly into the busy junction, compounding safety concerns, particularly again for children. School-related parking, particularly on Hare Hedge Lane and Ralston Road, already causes severe congestion. Peak time enforced parking restrictions in the vicinity of the schools are therefore essential. Relocating the care home would increase traffic and noise on an already busy Hare Hedge Lane and should be reconsidered, especially as the new design doesn't reflect local character as noted in the design and access statement. Lastly, the omission of the northbound bus stop on Ralston Road undermines public transport access and must be addressed. With no confirmed plans for the centre, new residents will rely on existing amenities in Stretton and Horninglow Road. This junction will be a key access point, and without upgrades, local services and amenities risk being overstretched. The centre needs to be reviewed and agreed at an early stage so as not to impact local residents with buildings that are not in character with those in the local area. This year, contractors for the development removed trees and historic hedgerows during peak nesting season to begin work on the Spine Road. These historic hedgerows are vital habitats for protected species like bats, song thrushes and sparrows. This breached legal protections and undermined public trust, especially for development stating leadership in sustainability and biodiversity net gain. There is strong objection to the unnecessary further removal of hedges now planned for Ralston Road and between Wilson Way and the site. This lacks justification and contradicts BNG best practice. In summary, as proposed, these plans do not address the core issues of the community and introduce new risks. We need community-focused, high-quality, evidence-based planning that prioritises safety, accessibility and sustainability, not quick fixes that create long-term problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have the second speaker, Colin McLean, please?
Good afternoon. I speak against the application as currently proposed. I will share resident feedback, and I have included proposals to support progress with this development. I have lived on Harehedge Lane for 31 years and observed the impact of population growth on our local infrastructure. We must get this development right for all who live in this community. Within the application's revised plans and drawings, there are unacceptable revisions and significant omissions. Firstly, this development land is the only land available to address the critical issue of local highway safety. Cars parking on Harehedge Lane and Ralston Road is a significant hazard to children, adult pedestrians and road users. 4 times on each school day, 2-directional traffic reduces to a single lane. Daily, we observe cars mounting the pavement and aggression between drivers. We ask for new plans to include school car parking to the southeast as well as the southwest of the development. In addition, we ask for the prohibition of roadside car parking along the full length of Harehedge Lane and on Ralston Road in the immediacy of Bitham Lane. Secondly, the care home revised location. The residents of the 24 homes in Wilson Way strongly object. A 3-floor care home is not compatible with the existing homes. The proposed location is too close, too high, and will overlook residents' windows and gardens. Finally, green buffer zones. Further consultation is needed to agree and lock in the green buffer zones between the existing homes and the new development, to agree the perimeter and boundary features, including existing hedges and new walls. As an example, a home being uniquely affected by this development is Nigelium Barn in Harehedge Lane. The homeowners deserve an urgent resolution of their issues. As a proactive democracy, we ask for the introduction of 3 community groups to this process. The objective to reach agreement with the planners and developers on the areas of residents' concern. Group 1, agree a car parking solution within the development area. Agree the prohibition of vehicle parking on local roads. Review the use of the land currently allocated for a local centre. Group 2, agree the care home location. Agree the size and form of the green buffer zones. Group 3, agree the layout and features of the new junction between Ralston Road, Harehedge Lane and Bitham Lane, inclusive of local area biodiversity protection. Together we can achieve this development. This is a critical time in decision making, and small community groups working alongside planners and developers will expedite completion. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I have the third speaker, Jessica Graham, please?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jessica Graham. I'm a planning consultant at Savills, representing the applicant Barrett David Wilson Homes. Barrett has been awarded 5-star status from the HBF for 16 consecutive years, and they are working in partnership with Homes England to deliver the first 300-dwelling phase of the hybrid scheme. The amendments proposed to the outline permission through this Section 73 application will enable the delivery of the Reserve Matter scheme, an exemplar development unlike anything East Staffordshire Council or the rest of England have determined to date. This is a key change since the hybrid application was approved. The importance of this development to the house building industry to meet and better government targets for future sustainability and carbon reduction should not be understated, and it will attract national coverage. This is a very exciting opportunity for East Staffordshire. Although the wider context is important, you are being asked today to only determine the Section 73 application which is in front of you. The amendments being proposed to the hybrid planning permission are to ensure consistency with the submitted reserve matters application. It is normal practice for outline permissions to be amended following the grant of approval when there is more detailed understanding of the site and design requirements. The reserve matters application is not for discussion today but will be presented separately to members in the coming weeks. The officer's report provides a comprehensive overview of the amendments sought through this Section 73 application, which are not significant, and there are no technical objections from statutory consultees. The two biggest changes in this Section 73 application relate to the care home location and the vehicular access onto Harehedge Lane. In relation to the care home, Design Review Midlands, an independent panel, agreed with that the new location is better suited to the development, given the close proximity to the proposed local centre and urban edge of the settlement. As part of the separate reserve matters application, careful attention has been paid to the design of the building and its proximity to existing properties, ensuring the proposals exceed the separation distances required by local policy. Therefore, the location shown on the amended Section 73 parameter plans is suitable, and a policy-compliant care home can be delivered in the revised location. In relation to Harehedge Lane, evidence has been provided by Barrett to the satisfaction of Staffordshire County Council that the restricted two-way use of Harehedge Lane is appropriate and will have a similar impact to that assessed and approved at the hybrid stage. Homes England and Barrett are continuing to work with the County Council on wider infrastructure improvements. To conclude, this Section 73 application is essential to ensure consistency between the reserve matters application and the hybrid approval. Your planning officers and statutory consultees have confirmed the proposed changes are both appropriate and justified, and these amendments will unlock the delivery of a groundbreaking scheme, which is the first of its kind in England. Thank you.
Thank you. I have no further speakers on this item, so now I'll open the floor up for debate with the committee members. Can I see an indication of anybody wishing to speak first? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite a few of the issues raised by the members of the public are concerned about highway safety of this project. And that's obviously been a concern to us today. We were out there, stood there, and actually had to move because we were concerned with the volume of traffic and the speed it was going along the road that we were stood at, looking at the site. And I just would like to ask the highways representative from Staffordshire County Council if there was some possibility of people have requested double yellow lines as requested, whether that's a possibility, and whether there's whether they considered the speed reduction, I think it was, from 40 to 30 miles an hour. And I'd also just like to have a little bit of a brief explanation of how the increase in numbers of traffic movements had been calculated. Because obviously we heard that the change from the old scheme to the new scheme had increased the number of traffic movements. I think it was between 8 and 9 in the morning, and for 25 between 5 and 6 in the afternoon. I'd actually wonder also what they would be like between about 3 and 3:30 when the school books out. And I think that would be quite an important consideration as well. I'd just like to see if we could get a bit of a view about how they were arrived at, if that's possible.
Thank you, Councillor. Forgive me because I was just typing down your questions because I will forget. That's my age, unfortunately. In terms of, let's do the increasing numbers first. I'll just go back to the various other things. Obviously, the outline planning permission, as Alan, the planning officer, has already stated, gave a quantum of vehicle movements in various directions out of the site. The change that is being put forward, that is in front of you today, is still using Harehedge Lane as an access, but there's a little bit more coming off it because the one way has been extended. So you've obviously got the care home going in and a small quantum is 50-something houses. So the documents, the work that sits behind that was called a traffic transport assessment. That's a standard document throughout the country, whether we were sitting in Cumbria, Cornwall, wherever. It's a standard thing that developers produce. It's a standard thing that all highway authorities ask for. So when they produce that document, as in planning, land use is broken down into units. And housing, for example, is C3 in a land use. Industrial units are B2, B8. You'll be familiar with those potential phrases on committee. So each land use can generate a trip pattern. So housing generates a percentage of car trips per house, and that is standard across the country. So one house will generate so many car trips.
Wherever the house is in the country?
Yes. There is something called the trip rate model that all developers and we as a highway authority use, that is England-wide, and that is what the developer has tapped into. So they can pick similar developments around the UK to do a comparison, because you could say a housing development in Burton doesn't match a housing development in Barrow and Furness in Cumbria. They're two completely different locations. So the trip rates are grouped together to get an average of the UK based on the size and quantum of development. They are then agreed with us as a highway authority. We have in-house, not me, I'm not that expert and I'll freely put my hands up to say that, we have in-house within the highway authority traffic modellers who deal with traffic modelling as part of their job and do nothing else. So the consultants, the applicants, generate data, from a national model, which then has to be agreed with the highway authority. So once that data has been agreed, that is then the basis for working out X amount of houses equals so many trips, and then you decide which way they're going, etc., etc. So in terms of the outline, there was an agreement those years ago in terms of a traffic generation, and that was what was then agreed at the outline planning permission. So many cars go that way, so many cars go that way, in crude terms. The change in front of us today on Harehedge, which is where I'm picking up where the issues are, we are reviewing, determining, discussing what that uplift, it is an uplift, there's no two ways about it, what that does to the network. So we go back to that figure that was approved at the outline, and that's what the consultants have used. Because the house is still a house, and each house generates a car-borne journey. So the house hasn't changed, so the trip value hasn't changed, because the house is still there. It's just coming off Harehedge where it wasn't before. So the data that sat behind the figure of these 20-odd extra car movements is generated from that historic per house generates so many car trips on the outline. That is standard procedure. There is nothing that we have seen underhand by the developer. That is standard procedure. We agreed that, and that's where that 20-ish trips in the morning and evening peak comes from. So that was where that calculation is. I'm more than happy to take a secondary question. Now, in terms of the peak that you mentioned, again, just being open and honest, in the transport modelling world, everybody, I'll say whether we're in Devon, Cornwall, Northumbria, we all look at an AM and a PM, which is the 8 AM and the 5 till 6. That is standard. And if we go to an appeal situation, that's what a planning inspector will look at. So that's what the consultants have done in this case, because that is the standard regime for looking at stuff. Now, obviously, you've mentioned 3 p.m. as school kicking out time. I accept that, but obviously from a professional point of view, the consultant has to concentrate on the morning 8 a.m. till 9 and the 1700 to 1800, 5 till 6. They haven't missed that out deliberately. That's the standard that they are required to do. Now, if you felt that that was worse than, say, 5 to 6 o'clock, you know, if that's your opinion, obviously we don't have that data. That hasn't come through here. It's within your gift here to discuss that, you know. But I'm just trying to explain the protocol that they have followed. Now, let's just go back to your first...
Could I just, before
yeah,
we
of course
move
you
on
can.
that, could I just ask another question? So is there no local knowledge involved in that calculation at all? Because obviously Cornwall and Burton are different places, but the very fact that that is opposite a school must make a bit of a difference, I would have thought, to the traffic movement on the road there. And is that not part of the modelling or part of the calculation? Or where does the local knowledge come into this calculation? Or
So what would have happened at the outline planning application? What was it, 2021, I think it was, wasn't it, Alan? The transport assessment document, the transport document, would have gone and done some surveys, local, on-the-ground surveys. And what you often see as a motorist, whether you recognise them, is you have a black tube that goes across the line, you've got thud-thud as you drive over it. So that captures speed and the volume of traffic that goes over it. So as part of that original work in the outline application in 2021, the applicant would have gone and got data, generally through those tubes. There are other methods, but generally the tubes is what you see. That is then put into the model, and the model then uses the unit per house that I've just discussed to factor up how much traffic it's going to generate. So again, there is data that would have been collected for the outline application. Per house generates so much traffic. Combine the two and you get the output. So obviously we are still using the original data in the updated information that's been provided. The transport consultant the applicant has produced has used, again, updated modelling methods to verify that those calculations are still accurate. Hence, we've said we're happy with them. But yes, there would have been originally local data taken, but that is data that was from the original outline application that has just been remodelled, reused with that additional uplift that the applicant is asking for.
and the original modelling would be 2021? Did we say? Sorry, I can't remember.
You're talking roughly now. It's probably 5 years old now.
Like COVID time or something?
Pre-COVID.
Pre-COVID.
Yeah, because your application was around the COVID time, but the data would have been collected before that, because the data would have had to be collected before the application was obviously submitted, because they needed to produce a technical report. So you're talking pre-COVID, but it is still, from a professional point of view, it's still within the window of acceptability for us as professionals, given the exercise and the work that they have undertaken. Whether you agree with that is another matter, but that's where we are. Yeah, I was just about to say that. Forgive me. In terms of, you were talking about speeds and safety. Double yellow lines, yeah. In terms of double yellow lines, obviously we've not picked up on that previously in terms of what's been agreed at the outline planning application stage. Double yellow lines require something called a traffic regulation order. It's something we can't do without going through a legal process. Again, without wishing to not answer the question, it is within your gift, within committee, to discuss that, and if you feel that is required, you know, that could be part of your debate. We did not see that at the time and now as being an ultimate requirement. The thing with a traffic regulation order is, like most things, it has to go out to consultation. There is always a risk with a traffic regulation order it does not happen, because there are certain people that can object to it and it doesn't happen. So there is always a risk with applying for one that it doesn't get approved. And I say, we put it out to consultation. It goes out to the police, the fire authority, ambulance, etc., etc. But there is always a risk that it doesn't get approved. So sometimes councils see something go on a planning permission, but it doesn't always get delivered on the ground. So there is that risk.
But
And again, in speed,
if we don't ask for it, it's not going to happen anyway.
No.
So there's no risk, really. The risk is it stays as it is.
Yes.
We get a double yellow lines, if that was something the committee decided.
If it was decided. And the same with speed. Any changes to current speed limits are, again, a statutory legal process has to be gone through. Again, it's another traffic regulation order to move speed signs. And I might go into it because, again, I'm no speed limit expert. That's the design team within the authority. There are set rules and regulations nationally to where speed limit signs can be set for obviously visibility and giving drivers enough time to react to a change. So things are possible if deemed necessary. It just has to go through a statutory legal procedure, and there's always the risk that it might be objected to and refused.
But as a committee, that's something that we could ask for.
If, I'm not putting words in anybody's mouth here, if you deem through your discussions today that what is in front of you is not satisfactory and you don't accept what the officers are telling you, that's your perception, that's your decision to make whether what in front of you today is acceptable. If you feel it isn't, then you can make recommendations to your officers on what you think you want to see in order for it to be acceptable to yourselves. I won't say too much because, as I say, the planners could make an observation on that.
Thank you. Do I see any other speaker? Councillor Huckabee.
Yeah, picking up on Councillor Jones's entry into the debate. I am aware that benchmarking for local governments seems to be a way of determining what is going to happen in the future. There are many critics of benchmarking as a means of determining what that future will be. If you get a range of councils on one particular subject and look at what they're doing to base your initiatives on, it might be that only one of those 20 ever did any original work and the rest have all copied it. That depends then on the quality of the work done by that original council. Now, when the county council representative tells me that they look at a group of situations, as Councillor Jones said, that the particular happening in Cornwall might well be totally different from the particular happening in Air Edge Lane. That seems to me to be an element of benchmarking. So, do you do Plan, Do, Check, Act, which is one of the quality engineering initiatives by a chap called W. Edwards Deming, who is quite a prominent quality engineer, which means the question is, do you go back from your model to the reality on the ground after the plans have been developed to see whether the model is accurate? I don't know whether that question is going to be answered yes or no. Would you like to?
It's not a yes or a no answer, Councillor.
Councillor, do you want to turn your mic on?
The description I've given in terms of using a national model to ascertain trip rates, a house generates a trip, a factory generates a trip. That happens anywhere around the country, in any town hall. That is a standard procedure for any developer to refer to, and a discussion that is then had with the local highway authority. The data is married to local surveys, and it is agreed by our own traffic modelers, who know far more than I do, so I won't go into detail because I don't have that detail because I'm not a traffic modeler. But it is detail that is agreed by us as a highway authority, and if you go to a public inquiry or a planning hearing, it is accepted generally by planning inspectors that that is the accepted model and that is the accepted way of analysing traffic impact. So the data is always analysed, is always checked as part of a planning application based on the data that has been obtained on the ground, using a national model to generate X amount of houses equals X amount of trips and the way they're going to distribute themselves. So forgive me, it isn't a yes or a no answer. It's a standard procedure that has been followed, that has been agreed between us as the highway authority and the applicant. I don't know whether that answers or there's a subsequent question to come from there, but it's not a simple yes or a no in that sense.
Okay, I'll have to accept that. It does seem to be, the answer to my question was, I don't know. On another issue, we've got £2 million odd committed to education through the S106 agreements. Does anybody know where that money's going to be spent? Because I would think £2 million given to deferrers might well account for another increase in movements along Heritage Lane that probably, I don't know whether it's been taken into account, but where there's development, there's going to be movement. And if that movement is towards deferrers, then those increases, which I would again question, the amount of traffic in Heritage Lane. We were there an hour perhaps, and I counted 37 vehicular movements with 3 vehicles parked permanently. And that was in 1 hour, so 133 a day doesn't sound applicable. But also, within those traffic movements, there was a set day where no pupils were in attendance, and that was the same amount of traffic movement in Heritage Lane as when the school was fully open with hundreds of children visiting with their parents and being dropped off. So whether you're extremely lucky in your counts, I mean, you admit there's going to be an increase, but I would think that coupled to the last question of do you ever go back and check your models for accuracy to see whether reality actually follows the model or not is one that I think ought to be answered.
If I can just come back on 2 things that you just mentioned. I will defer to your planning officers if they think I'm saying something completely different. I'm obviously not going to talk for our education colleagues because I'm not SCC education. However, the monies that they normally secure is for additional places in local schools. Obviously the site doesn't have a school on it, so any children that go there have to go to a local school somewhere. So generally our education colleagues again have a price per house, because that house could have a school child within it. So you do have obviously local schools nearby that are within walking distance. So I don't know the ultimate answer, but the figure that is shown there on screen would generally be to provide additional school places in existing schools. That's not enough, in my opinion, to build a brand new one. So that would probably be to expand local schools based on the housing that will go in. So that's that bit. Again, I will defer to the planners if they can tell me something different, but that's generally what our education colleagues seek. Now, in terms of, let's just go again round robin to mention something. In terms of the County Council Education Department, as the Education Authority, have a policy with regards to the distance that is acceptable for a child to walk to a primary school, which is 2 miles. And obviously it's further for a secondary school. So you do obviously have schools within 2 miles. So from an education perspective, that's probably deemed acceptable. And again, that's what probably that 2 million in my mind is, a school expansion rather than a brand new school. Obviously, as part of the original outline planning permission, and your planning officer showed a table during his presentation with regards to contributions that were taken from the developer. One was a travel plan monitoring fee. Now, obviously, a development of this size is required to produce a travel plan to reduce the level of car-borne trips, to encourage people to walk, to cycle and use public transport. Now, obviously, having schools within a 2-mile catchment would mean that, in theory, people should be able to walk. And that's where footways, connections, etc. are important in the reserve matters application, which we're not determining today, but just giving you that bigger picture, is important to provide links so that you don't have to drive. And then I just want to throw something into the mix again, that's just popped into my mind from previous councillors' comments, just in case it crops up in anybody's mind. You're talking about school parking provision, you know, for pick-up, drop-off. And again, don't shoot me, I'm not from the Education Authority, but the education policy is not to provide pick-up, drop-off facilities for any school. That is the County Council's education policy. However, and I just asked planning officer sat next to me, from my recollection, and somebody can tell me otherwise, when we were debating this years ago with regards to the outline planning application, it was agreed that the local centre car park could be used as a pick-up drop-off facility when it was available. And I do believe that the developer was accepting that concept. Obviously, it's not there at the moment, so Hare Hedge Lane is a bit of a issue for you. But the concept at the outline was at 8 in the morning, that shop, whether it be a Co-op or a Tesco Express or something like that, wouldn't be hugely busy. So that car park could be used by parents. And again, at 3 in the afternoon, again, that could be available for parents. And that was a concept that was agreed at the outline. It's just obviously not there at the moment. So that will come, but not at the moment, obviously.
Councillor Huckabee, can I just ask Planning Officer Alan Harvey to come back in? He wanted to comment.
Okay, yes, Chair. I mean, it was just really to cover off some of the points that that there was a provision within the original approval from 2023 for 36 spaces to be made available as a temporary car park area for community car parking. That still forms part of the application, so that's not been changed. Hence, that's not one of the conditions that are in front of members for proposed changes, because it remains the same, and that's been transferred straight across in terms of the documentation. In terms of the educational amounts, the County Education Authority didn't specify specific schools for those sums. Although to go into the point, just to cover the points off, obviously in terms of if they were proposing to expand the school, as in a physical extension to the school, then that in itself would need a planning application, which would then be determined on its own merits, which we keep hearing. Sometimes the county council submit those to themselves because as the education authority they're entitled to do so, but as this council is consulted on those applications, and they have to undertake the normal public consultation that we have to undertake. So if that covers off those 2 points.
I've got some other speakers now, Councillor Huckabee. So Councillor Whittaker.
Thank you. It seems very frustrating, I know, when we're faced with this. With all due respect to the highways, twice you said that these things are within our gift, but as councillors we know they're not defendable in an appeal. Over the last, well, since I've been on the planning, there's always been this great movement for empowering local people, community groups, and we seem to be in the position where we're further away from that today than we've ever been. And I find that incredible and incredibly frustrating for the members of this committee sitting here now. Just a couple of things to just get clarity on. One was the junction between to Ralston Lane from Harehedge Lane. Originally, as I saw in one of the reports, it was to be finished by 2023. And then I thought in the correspondence today it said something about the plans have got to be finalised by the building of the 100th house or the 50th house. But what about the completion of it? Is there some sort of cloudiness around that, or is this something that can be delayed by condition? And secondly was on the Spine Road, and I haven't noticed in the report, it might be in there, is there a weight restriction on that, and is there speed bumps or whatever as well? So if you can address those, please. Thank you.
Well, I can pick up the first question, and then I'll let maybe Mark take up the question on the, because the highways will cover the 278 will cover the Spine Road protections, etc. So the date you quoted of 2023 was a point made by a local resident, so that wasn't. So I would guess that reference was there was an earlier planning permission from in 2021 that lapsed. Yeah, 2015. But there was an original 2015 application, and then there was a detail, a reserved matters for that, and so they probably picked up the date from that. So, but the actual permission that's obviously members are talking about today, the original permission, only dates from 2024, so it couldn't possibly have been provided in 2023, and it is in the condition, and the condition is condition 34 in terms of what the requirements are. So if we can just quickly go there and read that out. So this is the original. This is the 2023, and it's on again. So that just requires. So because it's got to be agreed under the 278, the condition relates to a plan from the 2023 application, and then it says that the works for the improvement of Harehedge Lane, Bitham Lane Junction shall be completed prior to the occupation of the 100th dwelling.
Completed.
Completed.
Yeah, I got the impression before when someone was in the report saying they just said when the plans have been finalised by that. So
yes, so so obviously the plans have to be in place and the works completed before the 100th dwelling, and the code to that is that in accordance with a detailed scheme that shall be first approved in writing by the local planning authority and approved under section 278 of the Highways Act. So it's clear that it has to meet both requirements.
Thanks for clarifying that. I was just asking the question on behalf of the public who would think.
Mark, do you want to come back on the highways issue?
I'll just add to that as well. Everything Alan said I agree with. Just for people who are not familiar, maybe yourselves or people in the audience, a developer can get planning permission, and obviously, as Alan has said, condition 34 requires what we call off-site highway works to be carried out. The only mechanism the applicant, the developer, has is through the Highways Act 1980 to do that. So they have to apply to us as Highway Authority. So what this condition is asking is they submit drawings and we then approve those drawings as the Highway Authority. Now that technical check can take months because it is going into granular detail of, you know, curbing and the makeup of the road and the footpath, and obviously in that case there's a pedestrian crossing going in. So there is many drawings to be looked at, which is why it can take months. And obviously it has to be built and operational by the 100th dwelling. So that's just that clarification. Yes, planning permission was granted 2023. It's still going through its technical checks with us as the Highway Authority. Hasn't been approved yet, hence there's no work started on the ground. But the applicant either has to get that in, technically, by 100 dwellings, or technically they have to start building houses until that junction is upgraded in black and white. That's what that is. I'm going to ask the planning office, there was a question on the Spine Road, wasn't there? So was that the east-west Spine Road?
It's the east-west from Tutbury Road up through to Ralston Road.
Yeah. It's all right, forgive me, I haven't got that plan with me. Your question was about speed cushions, wasn't there? I can't
Speed and weight. It was a weight restriction.
I can't see off that, Alan, forgive me my eyesight, whether that drawing had speed cushions on it that you're showing on screen. It was originally to be a bus route, wasn't it? And we don't normally have speed cushions on bus routes. But you wouldn't normally put a weight limit on something unless there's a damn good reason. The road's big enough to cater, obviously, for a refuse lorry. Now, a refuse lorry would be heavier for a weight restriction because it's more than 7.5 tonnes. You know, so I know you could say for access, so a refuse lorry could go in. Is the concern regarding running between the two roads? Right. Yeah.
Yeah, just to cover this point, Mark. The drawing shown for illustrative purposes is the alignment. They were changing the alignment, so it's not a detailed drawing. So the detailed drawing's picked up by condition 42. So again, that's the same condition that the county recommended to us in 2023. And that talks about detailed submissions by condition, and that provides details of gradients and traffic calming measures and a timetable and programme for works. So there's a requirement for the developer to put forward a scheme to you. So again, that's something that you'll cover under the Highway Acts as well as the discharge condition.
Okay, forgive me, I'd forgotten that. So yes, there is a planning condition in the outline application. Obviously they haven't discharged yet, that hasn't come in. So that can be picked up and looked at a future date. Yeah.
Thanks for that. I'm a bit cynical about these spine roads, having gone through the West of Oxford one.
Councillor McKiernan.
Thank you, Chair. I've recently come back to this committee, so I've not been sitting on it very long. I'm someone who lives in Stretton, so I use that Hare Hedge Lane quite a lot, and I've seen how terrible the traffic is, as it is now, never mind with 500 houses on. I was a county councillor back in 2013 when all this first became to be discussed, and I remember at the time we were promised 50 car park places. It's now reduced, and I remember there being a scheme for 2 roundabouts at the junction, which has now somehow disappeared. I'm really pleased that we are developing this area. We do need more houses in the area. I don't want to hold up the development, but I am disappointed by the two of the things I've seen today. One is the cul-de-sac arrangement for the community space, and the other is the removal of the cycle and pedestrian way along Ralston Road. Perhaps you can do with that bit first. Why has it been removed when there's an awful lot of children, would use it coming from Ralston? And with regards to the cul-de-sac, where I'm coming from is what we want to do is reduce the traffic along Harehedge Lane. So the suggestion that we put double yellow lines down Harehedge Lane, I'd agree with. But it just seems to me that the number of cars that are going to use this community space, if we're going to move them off Harehedge Lane, it would seem to me better that they exit then through the Tutbury Road. They go through the estate and come out onto Tutbury Road. So everybody comes down Harehedge Lane. If they need to park, they go into the community centre part, and then they carry on up through the estate and come out onto Tutbury Road. So we don't have this in and out, which is just going to cause chaos. I'm agreeing with what Councillor Jones said before, that it is a unique space. It used to be, I don't know whether it still is, the largest secondary school in the whole of Staffordshire. We've got Outwood School adjacent to it. The two shops that are nearby are almost a mile away, one in Stretton and one at Horninglow Road. People will be coming to use that shop. Kids will be going there after school to get sweets and whatever, even if they're not allowed hot food. And then you've got the staffing issues from the care home. It just seems to me too small to expect a cul-de-sac, in effect, to deal with all that traffic. So why are we doing it in that way, and why aren't we exiting onto Tutbury Road, I suppose, is my question.
Yeah, do you want to come in, Alan?
Sorry, Chair. Just mainly because there was so much there. I just thought it'd be useful just before to enable Mark to come back on those points, or us as officers, just to clear up with Councillor McKeon and just go through those points again. So the footway you were talking about is the footway. It's within the application site. It's not actually on Ralston Road itself. So just to make sure everybody's clear about that, the cycle footway is within the application site, not along Ralston Road itself. So this is the 2023 plan. And then when you're talking about the cul-de-sac, you are saying the difference between it was in and out to the local centre on the 2023, and then you could go through northwards only to the rest of the site. Whereas when you come to the scheme that's now in front of members, you've got that footway removed. So the applicants are saying that that people moving north to south can use either the footway that will be along the road here, or the footway through the green area, or this other footway. But in terms of the cul-de-sac, you're saying that the in and out is wholly to this, and therefore you can't get beyond that access, isn't it? That's the full summary of your points.
Yeah, it was I'm just trying to see if we can improve the traffic flow and reduce the traffic along Harehedge Lane.
Yeah. So
if I just pick up on, if we stay on that drawing, obviously where number 3 was, you've lost that footway cycleway. On the drawing that the planning officer showed previously, it was going through green space. Now, that would technically, this was only a master plan, obviously at the outline stage, that would be going through green space, and there would be potentially that would not be lit, so could have issues in areas of darkness or lack of light. Obviously, if you go, Alan, to the new proposed drawing, thank you, by removing it from where it was, the arrow for number 3, what they're proposing to say is there is still permeability, if I use a planning word, forgive me, into the site from the eastern side. You would come in on the Spine Road, and then you could drop down the new purple line through the housing estate. Now, obviously, you would be far more visible because you would be within an urban environment, rather than being in a green area that could be shielded by trees or hedges or things like that from a personal safety perspective. So from my personal point of view, it would be safer Now, obviously, what we're discussing here is things that we haven't seen yet because those planning applications haven't come forward. Yes, we're being asked to amend a concept idea drawing, but the detail hasn't come yet. They're future planning applications. But my perspective is you would take potentially children, vulnerable users out of a green corridor that may have safety issues. I don't know what the police may think, but you know, and then you put them on a road network that could have segregated cycle facilities in, and they are more visible to people. Again, if the planning officer has another opinion on that one. But in terms of, again, your secondary point in terms of the southern access, I think personally, whatever you do, you will not satisfy everybody. You know, when the application originally was assessed, it was looked at all those years ago as no restrictions anywhere. You know, there were 3 points of access. What would that do, etc. Then when we came to the restriction that we have in front of us now, whatever concept you come up with will still throw traffic onto Hare Hedge Lane, and will still throw traffic towards the Rolleston Bitham junction. It's just what is to a degree acceptable in terms of those flows. So again, that's a decision that you're here to make today in terms of what you feel is acceptable or not.
Thank you. Do I have any further speakers? Councillor Jones.
Chair, could I just add to that? Because, yeah, I was initially a bit concerned about the pedestrian and cycle route being removed. But then I realised that actually, you know, you're absolutely right. People will be quite vulnerable using that. It will be within a green space area. And it backs onto, people's gardens are at the back of it. It's not a road or anything. So, you know, they certainly won't want street lights going up there or anything at the end of their gardens, I'm sure. And I think as long as we make sure that that is included in the detail when that comes before us, that we do have a cycle and pedestrian access down, you know, the side of the road or whatever, I think that would be perfectly fine and actually better than what we've got there. So, Alan, presumably that there is going to be something on the detailed application that actually provides a cycle and pedestrian footpath, is there? Or walkway or whatever.
Off the top of my head, I can't exactly say it is, but because obviously it's not in front of us today. But obviously the developers here and heard your point, and obviously Mark and myself will go back on that point as well if it isn't covered.
Okay, well that is something that maybe as a planning committee we need to remember and put that forward when the detail comes before us anyway.
Correct. I mean, it's been made, as I say, the representation represented from the developers here, so they're hearing that loud and clear. So I think.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor McKernan, did you want to come back?
Okay. Yeah. So my concern before was that there seemed to be a through port. So for the kids that live in Rolleston who want to come on a bike or something, it now seems as though that purple line just stops in the middle of the housing development. So will there be a through port for children coming from outside the development? Because that's what we have to remember. It's not just for the children that are going to live on the estate.
Councillor Kiernan, that's the roadway. Yes, as you point, that's the roadway to go between the residential areas. But these are the footpaths, so it connects to a path network. It's there. That dotted line is the path network. You see that? The road that comes from the south crosses the footpath there. It's a footpath network. So if you were coming by bike or by foot, you would connect into that footway.
Thank you. Do I have any further speakers? Yeah. Councillor Huckabee.
Social housing. You've mentioned, the officers have mentioned that this is a site designated for affordable housing and residential housing. Given the fact that a significant attachment has been made in the corporate plan this year and last year for social housing and affordable housing, no mention of residential. Is it within the scope of the planning officers to discuss at this point down the line the actual mix of housing? Because a development of 500 houses is quite a big one. Is there no provision, or is there no attempt to negotiate with the premier developer the option for any social housing?
Councillor Huckabee, the matter of the composition of the actual development will come forward at reserve matters, and that does include affordable housing, and as per the section 106 it'll be all provided on site, so it'll be pro rata in accordance with our supplementary planning guidance. So there'll be affordable housing, there'll be a mix, and it'll come forward as part of that reserve matters application for you to consider at that point.
I notice you don't mention social housing in your statement.
Shall I go to the specific wording in the section 106 agreement, our SPD? I can tell you it'll meet the government's definition of what affordable social housing, supplemented housing is under the Housing Acts and the Town and Country Planning Acts.
Okay, you've mentioned S106, so this council has a habit of transferring S106 monies from the area that
Councillor Huckabee, I think we need to stick to the subject matter here. Councillor Legg.
Thank you, Chairperson. Could I please go back to condition 34 and make sure it happens as the report, please, and the developer does not come back to us and says, can I just put another 200 on before we do the roadworks? I'd like to stick to the condition, please.
Chair or Councillor, you know I can't give you that guarantee because the Town and Country Planning Acts allow developers to come back and amend conditions. I would love to give that guarantee, but I can't give that guarantee, and we can't as an authority put any other condition on other than what we've put on. But if they ever do come back, they have to justify why it would be acceptable in highway safety terms.
Okay, thanks. And
yep, do you want to come back, Councillor?
yeah, can I have another question, please, regarding condition 17? I noticed today they have started the road. I didn't see no brushing or wheel washing, and the road was quite muddy. Can we make sure these things are in place for the residents, please?
Councillor, that point's picked up. That's a point that's actually we picked up as well.
I knew you wouldn't miss it. Thank you.
Councillor Whittaker.
Yeah, I'm quite happy with some of the improvements to this. I think the through roads and the taking traffic and bringing the children through the site, I think it's vastly improved. But I'm undecided about the position of the care home. I like the position where it was before. I can't really see why that's got to be an adjacent to the shops. I don't know what the pretext for the move was, but I liked it in the previous position. And I think because we're going to the unknown with this development down the bottom with the shops and the care home, you've got that relatively small site at the bottom. You've got, same as you said, the school drop-off, which you could incorporate the site. The care home, the parking requirements of the care home and visitors as well, I think the combination of all those mixed up, I think the scheme would work a lot better if the care home was in the previous site onto Tutbury Road, and I would support that a lot more than the scheme presently on the table.
I suppose, Chair, I'm going to have to come back and obviously make the point again that obviously as officers we're presenting the development that's put in front of us and therefore put in front of yourself. So that's the place they wish to propose the care home now. In terms of the justification, As I was referencing, I think I mentioned earlier, is that as a precursor to the application submissions, there was an involvement of the Design Midlands team, which the developers can go to Design Midlands and they can run scenarios past them. They're as an overarching body, look at what kind of quality and design comes to planning committees in due course. And as part of that process, as the applicants reference, it was agreed that the amended specialist accommodation was more accessible to the local centre, and it was considered that would be more in keeping with the urban character of the site. So that's the source of a background to it. I mean, obviously the developer is proposing this in that location, so ultimately it's the determination of whether that's acceptable as opposed to whether it's preferable elsewhere. As we keep saying, we have to determine the application on its own merits. And obviously that has brought with it additional traffic flows in and off Hares Lane, and we've had that debate in terms of how that works. But in terms of car parking, the care home would have to wash its own face in terms as a parcel in itself. It can't. It's not relying on residential car parking or the local shop car parking. It would have to have its own bespoke car parking facilities to serve that nursing home itself.
Is that enforceable though in the bigger scheme of things? I mean, I don't know how that can be divided off from one parking area, to be honest.
I mean, it's a question the chair might want to direct directly to the developers, but I suspect, like most care homes, they're a private care home, so they're not going to be wanting to provide car parking to the general public because it's bespoke for that particular use, so that it will be within private grounds in the same way as any care home or care facility has parking in its private grounds.
Thank you. If I can just call the developer's agent back, if you don't mind, to the front, just to clarify the parking arrangements. We wouldn't normally do this, but obviously this moving the application forward, I think it's important to just clarify parking arrangements for the care home side of things.
So you are fortunate enough to we have submitted the Reserve Matters application, which is live and being determined by your officers at the moment. So that shows that the care home washes its own face. You as a planning authority have your own parking standards. So there's requirements of a certain amount of spaces that have to be delivered with the care home. And just how it's working from a sort of developer perspective, the residential side of the 300 dwelling scheme that you'll see when you determine the RM application, that's been submitted or been led by Barrett, who are my direct client, and the care home scheme will be delivered by MAC Group. So they're a national care home provider, and they've been leading on that. So long story short, the care home will wash its own face with car parking. It will have its own separate number of spaces which are policy compliant, and again you will see that detail when you come to determine the RM application in the coming weeks.
Yeah, thank you for that. Councillor Slater.
Thank you, Chair. Right, I was pleased that the developer told us that this scheme will get national recognition. Forgive me if I'm wrong. I think the lady mentioned its carbon reduction and bio-net diversity gain things. I'm pleased with that. Obviously, we're not party to see that detail, are we? In this particular meeting, that's been presumably decided by the previous planning committee who approved the scheme in the first place. Slight issue I have. I noticed work has already started on the Spine Road at the top there, and I don't know, but I understand that technically the conditions that shouldn't start until these conditions have been approved, and I know this sort of thing may happen normally anyway, but I'm surprised that the developer doesn't, if that's the case, that the developer doesn't know that, and that we aren't sort of questioning it a bit more, really. Thank you.
Yes, you're right, Councillor Slater. Work has started on site without the relevant conditions being discharged. and we're currently investigating that matter.
Thank you. Do I have any further speakers on the item? Councillor McKiernan.
So I'm not sure what we're allowed to do here. If I wanted to progress this idea of one way off Hare Hedge Lane into the community space and then out through Tutbury Road, do I only have the option of voting against the application today, or do I need to propose something, or what do we do?
Thank you, Councillor McKiernan. So just speaking with the planning officer and legal representatives, if you was to choose that route, the option is to defer the application, and then obviously we'd have to have deferral reasons to go back with.
So I'm not sure what the support is in the room, but I propose that we defer it then.
Yeah, thank you. So before we go down any route, do I have any further speakers coming in? Councillor Huckabee.
Yeah, can I ask a question the other way round then? Is it possible to make it a condition that S106 monies is dedicated to this area and this area alone?
Through you, Chair. So in terms of the Section 106 agreement, ordinarily you can have a condition within the agreement. You would state where the money would have to be spent, but there's not a guarantee in the future that that money would be spent there, just because it might just be a case of, you know, for example, when it comes to schools money, the schools may not have a need for that money. So sometimes you may have to do, you know, a variation to that agreement in order to actually spend the money as well. So even though it may specify that in the agreement, that's not, I wouldn't say it's 100% guaranteed that that was what happened in the future, because it's depending on all sorts of circumstances in terms of, you know, the types of residents that are living there, the families that are living there, the type of school places that might be needed. But that would be, you know, it could be specified within the agreement, but I can't give you an in-cast guarantee that, you know, that's what would happen, that's all.
Thank you. Which brings me back to a previous discussion we're having with the County Council representative, which every school has a maximum population. Have you done the work to define what the populations are of the schools that are in the vicinity, and will the additional catchment area produce sufficient for existing children to be redirected to other schools because of that?
Councillor, I don't think any officer in the room has the knowledge of education to be able to answer that question fully. When County Council education officers provide responses to planning applications, they will certainly look at the capacity of nearby schools, and that's the basis of, you know, the contribution that they ask for. Going back to this case, they haven't actually specified in the Section 106 where the monies should go. Because, you know, by the time they get that money, that capacity might have changed. So yeah, I can't answer that question fully, I'm afraid.
Thank you. If I can just get legal to come in on that as well.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, the existing Section 106, it states, and the idea would be that there would be a variation to tie the existing Section 106 to this application, should you grant it. And in terms of the education contribution, it states that it's to provide additional secondary and post-16 places at a school in the Burton Secondary Cluster. I can't comment on what contributes the cluster at this point, but it's more than one school, I would imagine.
Councillor Whittaker, did you wish to come in, or was it Councillor Jones? Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't want to hold up approving this application if that's what the committee decides. But I would like to ask to add a condition or add something that we ask to have a look at a traffic regulation order for double yellow lines and a speed restriction there as a matter of urgency. But I wouldn't like to make the application dependent on that. If you follow, am I allowed to do that? Penny's looking.
I think what you've asked is a question that has a much wider perspective than probably you thought. Yes or no? Well, yes and no isn't unfortunately well, there is a yes and a no, but effectively what you're asking is you are placing a new requirement over and above what's on the original permission, and therefore, and you're entitled to do that if there's a materiality to it. So you've had the discussion today, and I'm assuming that the request, so it would be, what's the basis of that request? Is it because, not because of the development per se, because what we've got in front of us is there something in front that you've discussed today that's you believe materially different that warrants that? And then the answer to the question is, it can be sought, but it would have to, I think, I'm just going to check legal-wise whether it'd have to be under the Section 106, because the traffic regulation order was for inside the site was that. But it would therefore have to be a requirement of the Section 106, which the developer would have to agree. Because obviously, so you can, so again, we're back into the realms of, it's a difficult one, how to place it at this committee. It's a kind of, so if we go to the first question, if you want to propose or discuss that maybe through the chair, what's the materiality that you believe is required, and then we can go onto the next question.
Materiality, why I think that's required, is that I stood there today and I was concerned about the volume of traffic. I've heard from the residents about the concerns for safety, as it is today actually, and then we're looking at putting extra traffic movements on there, and that would increase the concern about safety aspects. So those are my concerns.
If Mr. Chair, if that's coming from Councillor Jones as a recommendation for deferment, all right.
Yeah, Councillor Huckabee, if you can just remain silent till you get
Chair, I did
asked
say
the
that
opportunity.
I wouldn't want to hold this
That's fine.
disapproval up if that's what the committee wanted to do.
That's fine.
That's not something I would
And the
want to hold
consideration of the double yellow lines, are you talking both sides, right the way down Hareridge Lane?
I would like the appropriate people to have a look at it and determine where it would be most beneficial.
Mr. Chair, could I come back in then in a proper sense?
Just a moment, please.
I think, Chair, going back to that question there, so if your proposal is supported, you would have to, my belief is you would have to defer that to go back to the developer, because it could only be secured by way of Section 106 and would have to go to their agreement. You would have to then, if it's in principle, so you're looking basically at two things. In terms of highways, you would have to look at the principle of it, and like just a quick discussion with Mark is, well, how far do the yellow lines go? Where do you want them? You know, there's a whole, it places a whole new emphasis of understanding on that. That has to be, you know, the developers have got a right of an opportunity to look at that and to see whether that's something they can agree to. If your justification is additional traffic, I understand that, but then equally it's an additional imposition on them, so it'd be reasonable to defer it to ask to look at some work into that.
So is it something that somebody else can do independently? Can the county councillor or whatever for that area have a look at doing this as the development progresses, rather than making it a condition of the application? Is it because, you know, if we're going to wait for traffic, I've dealt with traffic regulation orders through Barton, and you only need one person to object, and you're really stuck with that, and that could be, we could hold up this development for ages if you started to try and do that. And I really don't want to do that. So, you know, maybe this is something that I just have to drop and get onto the local representative for the area, maybe.
So yeah, well, if we want the developer to do it, and we think it's related to the development, then that has to come through the planning process. If you want the county council to look at it, there is the ability, and we'll have to defer to Mark in terms of how it gets looked at. But I mean, obviously there is the potential that a requirement of a TRO on the public highway has to go out for public consultation and has the potential to delay the process. But ultimately, if you as a councillor want the county council to look at it because it's an existing problem as well as what could happen, then it's not something for an, I mean, it's not even something really for an informative, it's something that you would go directly to the county council for and say, is there a case for a double yellow line as a traffic regulation order on Airheads Lane? So if I can defer to Mark on that issue, if we are we still including that in the planning debate?
Thank you. Two other things I would mention is just in terms of your concept. If you wanted to put double yellow lines in terms of your theory, your concept here, I just said to the planning officer sat next to me, is one thing I would consider is when they were to be implemented. As you heard earlier in the conversation, when the local centre comes forward, it has been agreed that can pick up and drop off for parking, 30 odd spaces or whatever it was. If theoretically you put those double yellow lines in tomorrow, that school traffic's got to go somewhere else, and the alternative solution, the local centre, isn't there. In my mind, if it were to happen through whatever mechanism, it would be sensible for those to go in after the provision of the local centre has gone in, because there is then an alternative. You're taking them off Airhead, where do they go? You either then result in indiscriminate parking on double yellows, and obviously that's a police enforcement issue, not a highway authority, because we don't have the power. So it's police that have to then enforce that. Or it moves the problem to neighbouring neighbourhoods. So my thought on that was, and again it's from a planning perspective, if that is a concept that is run with, I think there would need to be a timing of it, e.g. they wouldn't be implemented until the local centre was in place, because there is then another opportunity for somewhere else to go. In terms of the cost of the TRO, I'll take a hat off and be independent for a moment. The question you've got to ask yourself is exactly what Alan has just said, is do you believe the development that is in front of you now, that you are being asked to make a decision on, requires double yellow lines along Airheads Lane at a given point in time to make this proposal acceptable, to make it safe, to make it suitable? Okay? If that answer is yes, then you should try, if possible, to obtain that through the planning process. I'll put my hat back on and say, yes, there is a potential procedure through the county council, through the local area offices, through our own budgets. But that is public purse money that it would come from. Okay? So what you have to ask yourself is, what you're asking is, and forgive me if I'm being very simplistic here, are you asking to solve an existing problem, and you're asking the county council to solve that by double yellow lines, through a traffic regulation order, through the public purse? Or are you saying, given the additional volume of traffic, that short uplift that we've discussed today, to make Hare Hedge Lane safer for all users, you deem it necessary for double yellow lines to be included, in my eyes, after the local centre is available, to make the development then acceptable? I think that's the question in my mind. Again, I'm open to planners and legal opinion, but there we go.
Okay, thank you. I think probably I'm asking for an existing problem to be solved by the developer, which is probably not reasonable. And also, I'm thinking that, you know, when you do have the community parking there, what you do to try and make people use that rather than still park on the road, because I think that will still be an issue. So that is sort of my concern, really. Not sure development actually, makes it any worse.
Councillor Bullock, you've been sitting there patiently.
Well, I'd only like to add to that. It's okay for your trip monitors and everything, but what is already a chaotic road, can it be looked at again? It's not being looked at the worst times of day. 2 hours in the afternoon, that road is chaotic. It becomes a one lane. Parents park from 1:30 in the afternoon to pick up the children, and it just brings that road to a virtual standstill, and you can only use one side of the road. There's, people go up on the curbs, and I accept that you see the standard is the peak times are 5 and 6 and 8 and 9 in the morning. It's chaotic in the morning when children are being dropped off. And I can only see that a shop being in that area is just going to bring loads and loads more traffic, because it's going to be a shop that everybody's going to want to use because there's not one near it. So it's just always going to be compounded. So yes, double yellow lines, if we could have that, that would be great going forward. But I think we need to look at the traffic flow again. It's not being looked at its worst times. It's outside the norm. That's all I want to say.
Yeah, without wishing to appear to be repeating myself, you have the ability as committee to determine this application. If, and again, I'm going to defer to the planners if I say anything wrong, if you do not feel the officer's recommendation is correct, that you do not feel that the data in front of you is representative or accurate, that is what you are here to debate and decide upon. I will obviously defer to the chair and the planners, but obviously you have options in terms of what you can do in terms of making a decision today. I can't say what you can and can't do. It's up for you to determine. Obviously the officer recommendation is to approve. If you feel that you do not have sufficient data, or you feel the data is wrong, then there are options available, obviously, to get that for you to make an informed decision. But that is obviously something you have to debate and make your own minds on.
Yeah, Chair, so we're just discussing here because we're kind of coming to, not a hiatus, but a couple of councillors are kind of making the same point, and Councillor McKiernan picked up on and did a recommendation that then went round for further debate, and then there was again a discussion about alternatives or asking for particular information at particular points in time. So I didn't know if you wanted to do a wrap on that as well.
I suppose it's Councillor McKiernan, if you just want to be really clear, because you did put forward a proposal, we haven't moved that forward at this time. But if you could just clarify exactly what it is that you wanted to propose for a deferral. I took, but maybe you can clarify, that it was for further highway consideration of the access arrangements and volume of traffic onto Harehedge Lane. Was that right?
Oh, sorry, the spider. It was that, and the cul-de-sac arrangement needs to be looked at again, because there will be a lot of comings and goings. So to my mind, it would be better if that was made one way and went into the community space on Harehedge Lane, but out through Tutbury Road. I know from being a parent myself and having 3 kids at 2 different schools, you don't just pick up your kids and go. So some people, as people have said, have been there since 1:30 in the afternoon. So that car park will get full very quickly, and it is literally a bag. It's a cul-de-sac. It's exactly what it says. It will just be chaotic, and it's not the right solution as far as I can see. And adding to the mess by having people come back out into Harehedge Lane, I think it's just a recipe for disaster. However, I don't think I got a proper, or maybe I didn't understand. I'll give the officer another go, if you like, at explaining the justification of why you've decided to have it as a cul-de-sac and not a one-way system before we move on, if that's helpful.
Yeah, can we just be clear? The scheme's not being promoted by us as officers. Obviously Mark's given his advice on those issues.
I'm sorry, can I just come in?
I didn't hear any justification.
When you're talking about this cul-de-sac, you mean where it's going to stop traffic going past a certain point. That's not been proposed by the County Council Highways officers either. That is a proposal by the applicant.
I was just trying to be helpful.
Yeah, I just wanted to make that clear, that it wasn't a highway solution to a problem. It's something that the applicant has proposed. But yeah, maybe if Mark could just reiterate.
Could we ask the applicant again then? Is that possible? Because I do want to progress this, as I said before, but I'm really sticking on this point.
Yeah, I don't think we'll need to call the applicant up again. Obviously, the applications are before us and the arrangements and everything's before us as well. So, obviously, for deferral, you've mentioned why you'd like it to go for deferral. Can I just clarify from Planning Officer, you've made the notes necessary if we was to go down that route?
Yes, I have, yeah.
Quickly, Councillor Huckabee, you wanted to comment.
Yeah. The developer is in the driving seat on this, and on any other application will always be the case. So could I propose that this committee doesn't find in favour of this second proposal and invites the developer to come back again, taking into account Mr McLean's concise and pointed objections to the problems, and also take on board Councillor McKiernan's points. If that is asking for a deferment, then I so move.
So just clarifying, Councillor Huckabee, are you promoting a second proposal, or are you just tagging on to Councillor McKiernan's with your comments?
No, I'm proposing that the developer is invited to give us a third option, taking on board all the comments that we've made with regard to the traffic congestion in Heredge Lane and the junction at Rhythm Lane, Heredge Lane and Ralston Road. Of course, it might be of help if
just to clarify, councillors, your options in terms of the application which is before you is to either approve as per the recommendation, approve under some other terms that you might consider, defer as is the current proposal to allow for further consideration of the traffic modelling and surveys, etc., or to refuse for reasons which you would come forward with. There's no option to ask for a new application.
not a new application, but a third option.
Councillor, if I could be really clear on this, what you are proposing is a new application, because you are changing the terms of what their application is for. So that the requirement of us as officers and you as members is determine each application on its own merits. They've made quite clear what their proposals are. Councillor McKiernan has made a recommendation for deferral based on additional information and to look in terms of the traffic wise and to see whether that works in terms of the justification for their development. But that's not the same as going back to somebody and suggesting a whole form of development that is different. So we, as officers and as members, we're not entitled to do that. As legal advice was, is that you either determine the application as it stands on its own merits, you defer to ask the applicant to go back and address these additional points that you're making in terms of concerns about the material change to Harehead Lane as a consequence of the development, or you refuse the application. We can't go away and ask an applicant to design a new application. They're entitled to have a determination on their own application.
No. Your option number
Huckabee,
2.
can you come through me, please, as the chair? Any questions, can you come through me, please? Not just put your mic on and start speaking. Thank you. And if you can be concise and...
Then the options that I was just given, what I thought I described was option 2.
Which is deferral, yeah. Are you in agreement with that? Right, okay. Councillor Whittaker, do you want to quickly come in?
Yeah, just to come back again. I've been quite reassured, actually, especially by the county highways, which with a very pragmatic sort of response to it, that we can't expect this application to sort historic problems out. We know we've got problems in the area. We can't do anything about that. I've also been reassured by the agent when he said the issues about the care home. As a committee, we're not party to those reserved matters application or any of the description at this point. So we didn't know there was any sort of separate parking. So that was something we worried about at the time. But I don't know where we can go on this. I don't think we can defer this. I think it's going to be one of those, we've got to just sort of hope over time we can sort it. I do believe the sooner we get the shop and the drop-off centre, as soon as we can get that up and running, and then obviously when the development's complete, people will drop off across the Spine Road and they'll walk through the site as well. So that'll probably be a bigger relief than any. And then in the meantime, with Councillor Jones, if there's anything we can ever do to put traffic restrictions on that length for Hairhedge Lane, to encourage people to use the alternative drop-off points and let the children walk a bit further perhaps. But I can't see anything in front of me that makes me think to defer this, because I can't see an answer on the table at this point.
Councillor George.
Yeah, I'd like to back up Councillor Whittaker and Councillor Jones there. Some of this is historic, which we're not going to fix, and maybe, as Councillor Jones says, we can address that further down the line. And everything else that Councillor Whittaker has just said, I fully endorse, and I'd second that.
So just going back to Councillor Bullock, proposing the amendments obviously you were suggesting in your speech, are you looking for a deferral adding onto Councillor McKinnon with your comments? Yeah, so can you just briefly outline what your comments for deferral add-on are? If you can please press your mic.
That the monitoring of the traffic is revisited and local knowledge used to an already chaotic situation that can only get worse. With the proposed developments on Hairhedge Lane.
Right, so going back to Councillor McKinnon now, are you happy for those amendments as Councillor Bullock suggests to be added on with your
yes.
for deferral? Yeah. So for deferral, do I have a seconder before we take it to a vote? Councillor Smedley. So moving to deferral, obviously we've listened to the comments from Sheila McKinnon. If I don't have any further speakers, sorry by the way. Yeah, I'll just get the planning officer just to read it one final time.
So this was the deferral first proposed by Councillor McKinnon, added to by Councillor Bullock, and then confirmed by Councillor McKinnon to be added to her original deferral proposal, which was for further highway consideration of the access and volume of traffic onto Hairhedge Lane, including the traffic surveys to be revisited.
Can I
to revisit the community access.
What
Due
is it
to
in
the same
particular that
issues.
you want? So any deferral, you've got to be really clear to the applicant what it is that you want them to go away and look at. What is it in particular about that community car park that you want considering?
For all the reasons I said before, that it will just add to the chaos on Hairhedge Lane if cars are coming back onto Hairhedge Lane. Plus the staffing going in and out, plus the fact that parents will be waiting for children, so that car park will get full very quickly, and it won't flow. What I'm trying to do is increase the traffic flow, so I'm coming at it from the point of reducing congestion and increasing traffic flow through the area. And my suggestion would be that it would go one way through the community space and come out onto Tutbury Road. And I don't know whether I'm allowed to ask that, but
Chair, just to and go back to the whole of committee on this one, is that the original approval provided for in and out access to the community car park on Harehedge Lane. So the current scheme would also propose in and out of the community car park onto Harehedge Lane. So materiality, there's not been a change in that particular aspect of the scheme.
Are you happy with that response, Councillor McKinnon?
I'm not sure. As the proposed route is that you would cut off that access through the estate, and I'm saying don't do that.
Right, sorry, that's a slightly different nuanced point, is that you basically want, it's not about the actual use of the actual in and out of the car park, it's that you can't then continue northwards. That's fine. Although you could always continue, so you could continue northwards under the original scheme, but you can't now. That's fine, that's a clear steer. But it's not actually the use of the car park itself, because that's the same. We're clear on that.
Councillor Smedley, did you want to?
Am I able to add to this the consideration of double yellow lines once this in and out car park is established, that the developer takes control of that? Because I think with TROs, I know from my parish council hat on that we are often asked for money to be put forward, and I think it's a long drawn out process. So if a developer could be tied into it, it would make it a lot easier.
Councillor, just going to go back on to what we talked about earlier. I think that is a quite clear separate issue from the deferral that's been recommended, because what you're talking about is to inform further the committee's determination. We had quite a long debate, didn't we, about the yellow lines. The developer bringing the yellow lines forward will not be any quicker than the county council bringing it forward. It would be the same TRO process. However, you've got to give a justification that the development itself justifies the developer paying for that process. That was the whole process. That was the whole point of that debate, is that it's the materiality of this scheme in comparison to what we've already approved as a local planning authority. Would that justify the developer providing the yellow lines? It's not because it's more convenient or for them to pay. We've got to justify that that's a requirement. But it's a different issue from what Councillor McKeon's deferring on at the moment in time, if that helps.
Councillor Holton.
Yeah, just based on what Councillor Smedley has said, the justification surely would be the increase in cars to that area. Surely that would be sufficient justification to expect the applicant to consider yellow lines.
That's fine to do that then. We were clarifying that, picking up on Councillor Smedley's point, it's not the point Councillor Smedley was saying is it was quicker for the developer to bring that forward. I'm just clarifying that it's the materiality, and as long as we're happy with that, then that's a reasonable thing to look at as well as part of the deferral process.
I would definitely be in support of that as part of the deferral process, based on the justification of the increased transport and traffic in the area. Thank you.
So what we need, so there's 3 points to this deferral now. There's one which is to consider the access and volume of traffic onto Harehedge Lane. Second point about the traffic surveys that have fed into the highway information to date, and looking at a TRO. So I think it would be helpful if Councillor McKinnon, you could just clarify that they are the areas that you want to be included in your original proposal to defer, and if Councillor Smedley could confirm that you still second that.
Yes, but I'd like them to consider this cut-off. I can't describe where it is on that makes it a cul-de-sac and not a through road, and I'd like them to consider making it one way off Hare Hedge Lane and then through to Tutbury Road. I don't know how many times I can say this. That's at point 5.
Speaking with the planning officers, obviously they considered that as being part of the volume on Hare Edge Lane when that consideration takes place. So this will be the final time, Councillor Huckabee, so please put your hearing aids in. And
so we've got volume of traffic onto Hare Hedge Lane, which will cover the point that Councillor McKeon has just made. The traffic surveys that have been used to, underline the assessment, and also the investigation of a traffic regulation order.
Thank you. So moving forward with that proposal of Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Bullock, can I see a show of hands, all those in favour of that? So just apologies for that. I put Councillor Bullock as seconded. It's Councillor Smedley, just to clarify that. So we're still happy with the vote on that. All those in favour? 7. So that's 7 in favour, I believe. And all those against? That's 4 against. So the motion's carried for deferral. Yep, thank you. If any members of the public gallery want to leave now, you may do so before we move on to part 7 of the meeting. Thank you, members. Moving to agenda item number 7, request members to consider the appeals received and determined. Is that noted? Noted, thank you. Moving on to agenda item 8, request members to consider the planning permission circulated with the agenda. Is that noted? Thank you. Now we'll move over to the private part of the meeting. So, request that the press and public leave the room, that in accordance with section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the remainder of the meeting as it is likely in view of nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings that there would be disclosed exempt information as defined in paragraphs of part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act indicated in brackets before each item number on the agenda. Do I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor Legg. All those in favour? Thank you, that's everybody.